Hi, I'm Barbara Leader, Executive Editor of the Lafayette Daily Advertiser. I've recently moved to Lafayette to assume leadership of the Advertiser and to work with our super talented reporting team. The Lafayette Storytellers project has been a tradition in the Daily Advertiser's newsroom for several years. My role tonight is to be your MC. We so appreciate you taking a chance on live storytelling and sharing your evening with us. Tonight, we're joining Humana and 5 Americans from Acadiana to create community. Since 2016, the Storytellers Project has brought more than 100 shows each year to communities across the country. But we've canceled our in-person season as part of the USA Today Network's response to the novel coronavirus. While it feels unsafe to be together in theaters, it feels necessary to be together online. So we've handpicked incredible storytellers and inspiring people to bring you a show about growing up. One of our stories tonight contains childhood sexual trauma and the loss of a child. If you have experienced this yourself and need help, there are resources available. Call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 800-656-HOPE or 4673, or Maddie's Footprints, which supports families facing miscarriage, stillbirth, and infant loss. Let's say hi to tonight's storytellers. First, we have Erica Fox. Next, we have Ray Alford. Then Carly Sherman, Charlene Rubin, and last but not least, April Johnson. Tonight isn't a TED Talk. It's not a Toastmasters. It's not a how to talk, an inspirational speech, an educational lecture, or a slideshow. We won't sell you anything except maybe a subscription. This is storytelling, and storytelling is based on visiting. You open your heart and your mind, and you pay attention to a person you care about and you want to feel closer to. So we invite you to do that tonight. Some of these storytellers will be polished and professional. Some will be casual and conversational. We ask you to receive them all because that's how community change happens. We believe creating empathy and understanding is vital at all times, and especially in times of uncertainty. And now I am so excited to welcome up our first storyteller, Erica Fox. Erica is going to share her story of growing up surrounded by music. Erica?
Thanks, Barbara. I grew up on the north side of Lafayette, a small, friendly town in the heart of Louisiana. It's a place where family and faith comes first, and where simple things in life are celebrated. Lafayette's known for its spicy foods and diverse cultures and very many talented musicians, and it's where the term laissez le bon temps rouler, or let the good times roll, was born. And in my family, we live that motto to the fullest. In my house, music was the center of our lives. The living room was the heartbeat of our home, and it contained a 5-foot Zenith floor model console stereo with AM, FM radio, and record player. And I mean, this thing was huge. It was the first thing you noticed when you walked into our house, and although it made it seem a little cluttered and was a bit out of place, it was the most vital thing in our home, a very necessary part of our house. The radio dial stayed turned on 24 hours a day. We went to bed to the sound of music, and we awoke to the voices of our world-famous DJs. Or at least in my mind, they were world famous, like DJ Paul Tebow and JJ Kaye, both Black radio pioneers of the time, who broke color lines on air, and they fused various music traditions together, like Zydeco with a little Cajun and some rhythm and blues mixed with some country. And it was this dissonance that I heard every day that just resonated with me. And I looked forward to listening to music every day. It brought happiness and escape in our home. And I looked forward to maybe one day going to these places that I heard on the radio, like Motown or Hollywood, places that we could only dream about from our small town existence. You see, my mom worked retail at Walmart, and my dad was a janitor for a local grocery store called Wine Gardens, and then it became Safeway. And this was located in our only mall in town, the Northgate Mall. The Northgate Mall was epic. Growing up on the north side of town, it was the place to hang out. My parents worked hard, and oftentimes we may not have had much money, but we did make the most of it. My father worked no less than 20 hours a day. He would wake up before the sun, would go to work only to return after the sun had long set, just to go back out again to his second job to work with his brother. And although you would think that after a long work week, all my dad would want to do is rest or stay clear of his job, that's not what he did. You see, Tuesdays was his day off, and this was the day especially set aside to hang with me in that magical place, the Northgate Mall. Walking through the mall was a profound experience. I mean, this was the time before texting or Instagram. I mean, the mall was our Facebook and the epicenter of action. You'd see shops lit up and trendy window designs, the smell of food in the air, and people talking everywhere. Music was wafting from the stores, and it just created an excitement. Wonderment was found at places like Spencer's or Gadzooks or Rave Clothing Store. And the mall was our playground, and we had all day to play. Now, you see, my dad and I, we had a very strict routine, and we stuck to it religiously. First, a visit to Montgomery Ward's to say hello to my parent, Albert. That's French for Godfather. He was a mechanic at the auto department. Then a stop at Aladdin's Castle to play pinball machines. And I would try to beat my high score at Galaga or Miss Pac-Man or Centipede. Yes, I'm telling my age. And then next, my stomach started growling. We'd go to lunch at J.C. Penney's because they had the best red beans and rice. And yes, the department store had a restaurant in it. And our lunches, they were sacred. We'd share and talk and just stop the clock for once during the week. So Dad and I would just sit and kind of tell about our week with one another. So that was a special time for us. Next stop, we'd go to Wine Gardens to stop and say hello to the coworkers and to our play cousins, the customers, because they were like an extended family to us. Maybe a dessert at Orange Julius or a cookie at the cookie company, and then on to the crown jewel of stores. Sam Goody Music Store was the ultimate of our mall visit, and it's the one place that Daddy had saved up for a purchase for the week. This hallowed place was filled with sound and troughs of records and 45s. And it was especially super, not just because Dad and I had that special time together, but because it was also the day that records were released. Tuesdays were the days that new releases would come out for records. And so we were two kids in a candy store, just filing through those album covers, enjoying the artwork and reading the liner notes and just learning about the people who had worked on the record. That meant so much to me, feeling like I had been a part of the process. Each album telling its own story when you held it in your hand. And connection came through the touch and the feeling of it. Even the weight and the delicateness of the record was very special. You see, Dad and I would make our selections, sometimes very difficult with all that massive art in our presence, but we'd pick a few and we'd hurry home to throw it on that big coffin in our living room. Armed with fresh needle cartridges to avoid any record skipping, I just remember the crackling sound at the beginning of each song, building anticipation for the symphony of sound that we would soon be hearing. There were records just thrown all over the place in the living room, like Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life, French music by Clifton Chenier, soul music from Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and even some rock from the Doobie Brothers, I mean, you name it, we were probably listening to it. And my mom would join in listening to our new treasures as she would cook dinner. And we would dance and we sing into the evening. And I tell you, Tuesday nights were rocking, and that house on Essie Street was surely jumping. In 1983, we had a new addition to our family. After being an only child for almost 9 years, my brother Jeremy came along. In the summer of '83, he was born a preemie, 2 pounds and 11 ounces, and he battled for his life in the intensive care unit. And it was at that time that my parents were in and out of the hospital, often leaving me with my grandparents. My new baby brother just needed more attention from both of my parents, particularly those first few months. By now, I was immersed in the music, and I didn't feel slighted that some of our daddy daughter dates had to be postponed because by now I was just into the music. I was collecting even more albums, creating my own songs, trying my hand at making melodies. Music was my solace, and during those alone times, it was often my friend. I was creating my own songs and envisioning my own art, which I unknowingly had been honing by listening to all of those albums. My relationship grew so strong that I immediately knew about 12 years old that this was something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And by 13, I started singing in church, school musicals, and talent shows. I was writing my own songs and recording with some of the local music producers. And by 14, I had my own song on the radio, our local radio station, KJCB. By 17, a chance meeting with a local musician led me to landing my first record deal. And in the fall of '93, I moved to Los Angeles with an academic scholarship and the excitement of being signed to a record label. I'd finally make a record like those many we would listen to in our living room. I managed to juggle school and my grades at Occidental College, late night recording sessions. I worked a campus job in the daytime, and I led a band on the weekends, often hours away. To say I was maximizing my time was an understatement, but I was fiercely motivated to make this music thing work because I remembered my parents being back home working hard and knowing that they were cheering me on. Unfortunately, after 2 years on that record label, the company underwent executive changes, hired new executives and new talent, and my project was shelved. I was devastated that I had gotten so close, only to let it slip through my fingers. I would not record one single album or song during that time. And it kind of sucked. It was sad for me because everything I had worked toward was leading up to that, only to have it sit on a shelf somewhere. And the pressure of trying to secure another record deal, maintain school grades, and even starting to fight this new sense of homesickness that I had because I moved to LA where I knew no one, had no family, few friends, and the friends that I did have were homesick as well because most of them weren't from LA either. I found myself developing an anxiety to reach my goals, but not feeling supported by this big city. I wanted to give up. I'd often call home just needing reassurance or wanting to throw in the towel because life was just getting hard. But my dad would quickly reassure me to hold on, like Sam Cooke would say, or we've come too far to end it now, like Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. And I would immediately be transported back to the time when I was in that living room, dancing and laughing to those records and dreaming of being in that very place, Los Angeles. And it brought a sense of comfort and a sense of motivation. My dad always knew what words to say that would strike the right chord, and I would gladly accept his challenges to push through. And I was inspired even more to get out there and fight. And fight, I did. I sang anywhere and everywhere and anywhere that somebody would listen. So I would do backup studio sessions, sang for Laker games, performed as a character actor at Universal Studios. I even worked as an assistant and later became a marketing manager for a record company. I starred in theater plays, co-wrote songs, gigged on the weekends, toured in musical productions, including one produced by Mickey Stevenson and Smokey Robinson, my dad's musical hero, of which he finally got an opportunity to meet. I went on to secure two more record deals, graduated from college and high school, produced albums for myself and other artists, and finally was living the dream. I now produce and host a radio show on Tuesday nights and am a DJ myself. And the show's called Tuesday Takeover, which highlights Louisiana songwriters and celebrates our stories behind those songs. My life has been filled with many serendipitous moments, incredible moments because of music. And I owe a huge part of that to my daddy. Today, I'm a mom of two great kids, a boy and a girl, and they love music just as much as I do. They play instruments, they sing, and my house is filled with music again, just as it was when I was growing up. Even though my dad died last year in 2020, we still have that 40-year-old record console with the records still inside, and it continually reminds me of our time together. I often think of the influence that he's had on my life and my career, and how our love for music has passed on to the next generation, his grandkids. I mean, who would have thought or imagined that those daddy-daughter dates, or that record console, or those trips to the record store in the Northgate Mall would mold every aspect of my life and influence so much of who I am and who I've become. Those little moments, although precious and simple, like spending time with someone, can not only change your life, but have a lasting effect on the world.
Erica, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It took me back. I can certainly relate to the Orange Juliuses. They were a childhood favorite of mine. Humana is sponsoring Storytellers Project nationally and now virtually because they believe that sharing stories and connecting as humans, online or in person, makes for healthier people and healthier communities. And we need these connections to each other and to health now more than ever. As COVID-19 vaccinations become available in communities across the country, Humana strongly encourages us to consider getting the vaccine and discuss with your doctor what is best for your health. Visit humana.com for more about what they're doing each and every day to connect you to better health in the community. Our second storyteller tonight is Ray Alford. Ray says he hopes the story that he's about to tell will help someone. He would also like to dedicate his story to someone special in his life. Ray?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing, Barbara? Um, my story is dedicated to my aunt Glenda. She's in the hospital right now, and she was the one that really taught me about storytelling. My story starts in Kenner, Louisiana. Um, my family was real close. My grandparents, they stayed next door to us with my aunt Pearl and my cousin Shannon, and next door to her was my aunt Lois and my favorite cousins Eva and AJ. And right next door to them was my aunt Sue and my cousins Lisa and Joanne. And we was always in and out of each other's houses, right? Like every day, we were always zipping in and out of each other's houses. Um, I was a lot younger than my cousins, so my bedtime was a little bit different than theirs. Um, they would be still running amok at night, and my aunt Glenda would tuck me in at night, to tell me a bedtime story. Usually, like Three Little Pigs or Goldilocks or like an African fable or something like that, right? I remember one night in particular, she was getting ready to tell me a story, and we heard we heard my dad yelling in the background. Like he was in the living room watching sports or something. And I think the sportscaster had said a guy had struck out or something like that. And my dad blurts out, "You'll never see three strikes if you knock it out the park." Me and my aunt, we both laughed, and she began to tell her story. And her stories used to always start once upon a time. Fast forward to 2005, my life is in uh, disarray, right? Um, I'm going through a divorce, clubbing, going out every night, and I'm selling drugs, right? I'm hustling. Um, I was just in a bad place, and I needed to make a change soon, right before it was too late. This all changed in the summer of 2006. My favorite cousin Eva and her husband Daryl were coming into town. Eva had moved away to Houston when we were young, and I hadn't seen her in over like 10 years. Her and her husband have a hip hop video show in Houston called Street Flavor. And so I was real excited to see her. So I pulled up to my grandmother's house, and she came running outside to greet me. And when she got close, she paused. She looked me up and down, and she was like, "Ray?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And she was like, "What's up with the dope boy look?" I tried explaining my situation to her, and as we were speaking, her husband Daryl, he walks out, and he was shaking my hand when she like sarcastically, "Yeah, yeah, Daryl, this is my cousin, my super intelligent and talented cousin I was telling you about." Um, and she walked away dejectedly. As me and him were talking, he explained to me that my cousin always spoke highly of me. Um, and he told me that he could use me in Houston. He told me to just let him know when I was ready. Um, when they got ready to leave, I walked them out. And as I'm walking them out, he told me to make sure I call him or whatever. And I remember her telling me, "Ray, you need to grow up," right? That's my strike one. Um, when she told me that, I was hurt, but it didn't change anything, right? I was still doing what I was doing. A few months later, I get a call from Daryl, and he's telling me about an event that he's hosting called Kappa Beach Party in Galveston. Um, he wants me to come down there and meet them. So I took him up on his offer, and I get out there, and it's an eye opener for me. I've only seen like these people on television, on music videos and stuff like that, and now I'm shaking hands with them. Um, when I got back home, I told my friends about what was going on and that I was thinking about moving to Houston. And when I told them that, they decided to do a going away party for me. So the day of the party, I get a call from a good friend of mine, Antonio. He was throwing a party for me. He calls me, he's like, "Hey, where you at, man? Tonight's the party. Where you at?" And it was Friday night, and the money was rolling, and I didn't want to leave. Right? I didn't want to get out of there. So he called me like four more times, throughout the night. I think the last call was about 9, 10 o'clock. And he calls and asks me, where you at? We're supposed to ride together. We're supposed to be together. Where you at? And I told him I was on the way. I said, just go ahead and leave. And I was going to catch up with him at the club. I stayed out all night, flight, and about 5 o'clock that morning, I get a phone call telling me Antonio had been shot in the face last night on his way to the club. I immediately dropped everything that I had going on and I made my way to the hospital. When I arrived, I rushed up to the ICU and his whole family's up there in the waiting room. I started asking questions and his grandmother and his grandfather, they walk over to me and they say, let's take a walk. We go sit in another part of the waiting room and they commence to tell me Antonio's going to be okay. But you needed to get it. I needed to get it together before it's too late. They said Antonio had told him I was moving to Houston, and that's exactly what I should do. You're way too smart to be living so foolish. It's time for you to grow up. Strike two, right? Hurt, confused, tears coming down my face. I left the hospital and I broke down. It was at that moment I looked down at my phone and I made the call that turned my life around. I called Eva's husband, Daryl, and fighting back hurt and pride, I asked him if the offer was still on the table. Hearing the pain in my voice, he said yes, and then he asked what was going on. And I told him everything. 2 days later, I was on the bus to Houston. When I got there and got settled, they said, you have a Twitter, Facebook, anything like that? I said, nah, none of that. They said, well, you got to get a Twitter page. So they said, come up with a name. So I came up with Lil Ray Off the Block. And from that day on, I made a commitment to never sell myself short again, to never sell drugs again. No matter what was going on in my life or where I was at in life, I had to choose better. Later on, we sat down and I was asked what I wanted to be in life. I was coming off the streets, so I really had no clue. So I blurted out, radio DJ. They looked at me crazy. 2 years later, I would have my own radio show. Besides working in television, I've also been a part of the Storytellers project, this being my third time performing. And none of this would have been possible if not for me growing up. I learned in this life, you have to speak life into people that you love, even if it's a hurtful thing. You have to really speak life to people. You have to plant seeds of growth and maturity. My cousins Eva and my Antonio's grandparents, they did that for me. And if you're waiting on the third strike, you'll never see three strikes if you knock it out the park. Good night, y'all.
Thank you so much, Ray. It's wonderful to hear your story and to know that there's always a path forward. Our next storyteller is Carly Sherman. Carly is sharing a story about her family. Carly?
All right, y'all, let's take it back to about 1997. We're going to Hammond, Louisiana, which is where I'm originally from. We're going backstage at drama club practice in the school gym. We find about sixth grade Carly flipping through my script. I'm reading my lines, getting ready to go on stage, when a friend of a friend comes up, because the friend couldn't do it. She had to send the friend, right? The friend of the friend comes up to ask me a question and is like, Carly, can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah, girl, what's up? She's like, are you adopted? I was like, yeah, why? There's like 3 of us in our grade that are adopted. Like we all know that it's like a thing. It's like common knowledge, right? And she's like, I just want whatever, and runs away. I was like, well, that was weird. Later on that evening, her mom calls my mom to make her apologize for asking such an inappropriate question at drama club practice. I am so confused at this point. Like, what is going on that she needed to apologize for? So I get off the phone with her and her mom, and I look at my mom, and I'm like, she's like, Carly, you have to remember, not everyone understands family the way we do. Let's rewind it back to 1986. My parents have been married for about 6 years at this point. They've been trying to grow their family unsuccessfully. My mom went through fertility treatment for a while, and they had just opened up to the idea of adoption. So my dad, my mom, they're at my dad's office. He's a dentist. He is in the operatory with a patient. My mom is at the front desk. She gets a phone call, answers the phone, puts the phone to her chest, and yells to my dad, Kenny, do you want a baby? He's like, a baby what? Like a dog? She's like, no, a baby girl. He's like, yep. And that's the moment my parents found out they were becoming parents. So they packed everything up, drove 45 minutes south to New Orleans, which is where baby Carly was already on her way. You see, in 1986 and in Louisiana, all adoptions were closed adoptions. So on their way to New Orleans, they had to hire 2 lawyers, one for them and one for my birth mother. Because in a closed adoption, the birth parents and the parents never speak or interact. Everything is done through lawyers and at the hospital. Actually, there's a couple other things about closed adoptions. One of the unfortunate things is that birth parents, even after they have agreed to an adoption, can choose to reclaim their child. My birth mother, after I was born, decided to take me shopping. She wanted to buy me a going home outfit and a blanket to be presented to my parents in. My mom found out about it and said, this is it. It's over. That girl is going to walk into that store with a baby, look at all the baby clothes, all the baby shoes, all the baby toys, and she's going to change her mind. That's it. We've lost it. We've lost our chance at being parents. Thankfully, my birth mother was committed to her decision. So at 5 days old, I got presented to my parents, which means I have 2 birth certificates, one on January 21st, which is the day I was born, and the second on January 26th, which is my gotcha day and is the best day of my life, because that's the day I became Carly Ann Sherman. That's also the day my parents got to take me from New Orleans back to Hammond. And yes, it took 5 days because, the timeline of childbirth doesn't always align with legal proceedings. So we had to wait until everything was done. So I just hung out in the hospital for 5 days till I got to go home to my freshly painted pink room, which still smelled of fresh pink paint because my parents had 1 weekend to prepare to be parents. You see, what I think my mom was really trying to tell me when she said, not everyone understands family the way we do, is something that adopted families know, is that family is not defined by blood or DNA or what makes up your body. Your family is defined by relationships, by love, by the soul that's in that body. And I know that because I know that the 3 souls, Ann, Kenny, and Carly Sherman, were absolutely meant to be a family. And I know without a doubt, my mom was my soulmate. My mom passed away 11 years ago when I was 24. And as my dad and I navigated our grief together, we had some different ways of going about that. One of the things I decided I wanted to do was access my birth records. which in the state of Louisiana, only the adopted person can access their records, and only after you're 21 years old, and you have to go through a federal judge to do it. So I decided to go visit the judge and access my records, which was an interesting juxtaposition, because here I go to the federal courthouse in the parish, to the judge's chambers, and it's a very sterile federal official situation where I'm going to do something really fun and exciting and warm. And no, this was not some identity crisis moment like all the movies make it out to be, where there's some adult who has had this secret kept from them their entire life, and they find out they're adopted, and now I have an identity crisis and I need to go find who I really am. That is not a thing that has happened to me or any adopted person I know. Maybe it's happened to someone, but I don't know them. So no, this was not an identity crisis. This was about curiosity. It's kind of like when you find that photo album from when you went on family vacation when you were 3, like you were 3, you don't remember it, but it was still a part of your life and something that was important that happened. And how cool is it to flip through the photo album and like, look at Carly and her fanny pack in 1991. I was so cute, right? It's kind of like that. It's a really important time in my life that I didn't remember and thought it would be really cool to flip through that photo album, except I wasn't on a couch. I was in a judge's office, whatever. There's a couple things I found out in that judge's office that day. First, you can't take the records with you. Only the judge can make a photocopy. So I have some photocopies that I keep with me. I also found out that my birth mom was 17. She was from New Orleans. She lived at home with her mom and her grandma. There was no father listed in my paperwork. I found out my birth mother's middle name is Ann with an E. My middle name is Ann with an E, and my mom's first name was Ann with an E. And while my birth mother decided not to give me a name on my birth certificate, so that first birth certificate from the day I was born, and the line where it says first name, it just says baby. I found out that my mom did unofficially decide to call me Crystal, because when she saw me, she said it became crystal clear to her that she wanted to finish high school, finish her education, so that one day she could be the parent to a family that she couldn't be to me at that time. You know, I think kids are really fascinated by the idea of their birth story, their origin story, if you will, the story of how they came out of mommy's tummy, right? Well, I always knew I didn't come out of mommy's tummy. And my parents had a really cool way of explaining that. They said they prayed for me and I was brought to them by an angel. I always imagined as a kid that would be the winged spirit from heaven, right? Kind of the similar imagery of the stork carrying the swaddled baby, you know, down to the parents, but it was an angel instead of a stork. As I've grown up, I realize that that angel was a very real person, and it was my birth mother. As I've gathered information over the years about this friend of the friend at drama club practice who came and asked me this secretive, shameful, loaded question, why? What is society telling people about adoption that makes them so weird about it? That made her approach me and have to apologize on the phone later that day? So I've spent years figuring out, what is society telling you people about adoption? And here's what I've gathered. Apparently, there's a really weird, false narrative out there that adopted children are unwanted, are discarded, are unloved. That is so far from the truth. I mean, just think about it for a second. Someone gives birth to a child and looks at them and says, I love you so much that I want to give you the best shot at life that you can have, even if that's not with me. If that's not the most selfless act of love, I don't know what is. So no, we're not unloved. We're unconditionally loved. And we're not unwanted. We were chosen by our families. So if you ever find yourself in a conversation where someone is adopted, don't get weird about it. Ask them about it, because you just might get to hear one of the most beautiful and important stories of their life.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you for sharing how wonderful it was, the way your parents explained to you about your adoption. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Tonight's show is sponsored by Cox Communications, and we're so excited. Cox is sponsoring the Storytellers Project because they believe in connecting our community with each other and the people and the passions they care about the most. From FaceTime chats and video conferences that make us feel closer to people who are far apart, to the streaming shows and movies that give us something to share with the people we love. Cox uses technology to connect us to each other and to each other's hearts. And Cox is working hard to close the digital divide through the Connect to Compete program for school-age children. Learn more at cox.com/C2C. Connecting is exactly what we're doing here tonight. Our next storyteller is Charlene Rubin. Charlene would like to share her story about growing up in the country. Charlene?
Hello, and thanks for having me. My story starts in Whiteville, Louisiana, at my grandparents' home. They were foster parents. It was a bunch of us. We had good clothes and good shoes, but they were mainly for going to school and church. See, we had no reason to have good clothes and good shoes because we played outside all the time. We watched television on Sunday matinee. My favorite was Tarzan. My grandmom, we called her Aunt Mama because she had a lot of daughters, and my little brother thought she was an aunt, so we just started calling her Aunt Mama. We were a bunch. We had this one cousin, beautiful, tiny, clean, and not to mention, she was also mean as a copperhead snake. She was a sweet one. But you see, my grandparents, they were farmers. They grew all their food and raised all their animals. Our thing was the vegetables in the garden. Summers were so hot, we never wore our shoes. We would sneak in the garden, get some cucumbers and tomatoes, climb in the tree over the garage with some salt and pepper, and we would eat the vegetables. And when we were finished, my cousin, Miss Goody Two Shoes, would get out of the tree and go tell our mama what we had done. But she wouldn't say she was in it. Well, at that time, we would get a country behind spanking. Only because we had gave what we couldn't eat away to the hogs. See, we had a bunch of hogs and chickens and cows. My choice was feeding the chickens. I would pour the feed in the letter C of my name and watch the chickens form that letter C while they ate. We played games in the barnyard like barnyard darts and the barrel races. My favorite was the barnyard darts, where we would take a corn cob and bow a hole in it and stick a chicken's wing feather all the way through, so the point was coming through and the feather was at the back. We'd draw a circle in the dirt and we'd throw that dart, and whoever we hit closer to the center was the winner. And the barrel race, we would stand on top of the barrels and we would race those barrels to the fence. And if you hit the fence, you would win the race. One day, we made a bull's eye in this dirt, and I was the winner. We would make playhouses. Miss Goody Two Shoes' house was always neat, nice, and tidy. When she would turn her back, we would wreck her house. And we would get another country behind spanking from Aunt Mama. One particular day, we would all go to the bayou and fish. We had a pot we would leave out there, especially for when we would go out there and we would fry fish. Well, this particular day, my foster uncle decided he would build the fire with some hay. That didn't turn out too good. This goody two shoes told my grandmother that I did it. I had long hair when I turned to run. This goody two shoes pulled my hair, pulled me down in the dirt. I ran back home, dusty from head to toe. She had knocked me down. And my grandmother hated washing my hair because I had a lot of it. She would actually comb my hair the night before school and put a stocking over it to keep from having to comb it that morning. I went to school one morning. My grandmother had combed my hair and it wasn't all that. So when I got home, I didn't want my hair anymore. And I cut a plait. That time, I caught a country whipping in the town of Washington. Well, my mom had to fix that, so she cut the rest. My little brother called me a bald-headed tomboy for the longest, but I loved my afro. It was my afro. It was my hair. I loved it. I had a daughter at 17 years old. I thought I had grown up. Her dad took care of all her necessities. She had everything she needed. I didn't struggle because he had that part of the little girl. In 1995, I met my husband. In 97, we got married. My wedding was old-fashioned traditional. My mom made my dresses, and my Aunt Mama, and my mother-in-law made my wedding cake. I made all of my flowers. Everything was homemade. And with my husband came 4 children of his own. So now I found myself still growing up. And 25 years into my marriage, I realized I'm still growing up. I had to grow up to be a mother alone, grow up to be the wife, grow up to raise all 7 children, all in the same home, and grow up to be a good wife. And just when I thought I was grown, I find myself still growing up. I had to grow up to be a wise and wonderful grandmother. At 55 years old, I'm still growing up. Everything I am today, I had to grow up to be. All I think of doing is growing up all the time. I never want to stop growing up. I'm afraid if I stop growing up, I'll stop learning. I'll stop loving, and I'll stop living. I wake up every morning ready to grow up today. I'm always looking for a reason to grow up. I know I will grow up. I will have grown up and have raised all my grandkids and my family to be the woman I am, loving, growing, and living. That's the story of my growing up, although short, but it's my story. I'm growing up.
Charlene, listening to you puts me right back climbing my grandfather's fig tree, sitting up on the branches while he fed me figs and told me stories. And I know so many of us can relate to the story that you just told. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We're so thankful to you subscribers because you support this community's journalism. For those of you who aren't subscribers, we appreciate you giving us the chance to show our value to you tonight and hope you consider a digital subscription to the Daily Advertiser. One of tonight's coaches for the Storytellers is our breaking news reporter, Ashley White. I'd like to say a very special thank you to Ashley. Our next storyteller is April Johnson. April will share with us her story of strength. April.
Thank you. Growing up in Lafayette, Louisiana, I can honestly say that my early teenage days took a lot of major turns and twists. I was the only girl in the family, the eldest of two brothers, and my parents was divorced at a young age for me while I was in middle school. I was 13 years old in the 8th grade at Moss Middle School on the north side of Lafayette. And during that time and transitioning towards high school, I can honestly say that I learned a whole lot of lessons, but I also gained a whole lot of blessings that would impact my life forever. You see, in middle school, I was pretty quiet, but at times I was a social butterfly. I participated in activities like cheerleading and chorus, and just to meet other people and travel because I was the only girl and I didn't want to play with my brothers all the time. So I had to get out the house and do something. So my mom, she worked a whole lot. And my dad, he was a truck driver. And so he traveled cross country for like weeks at a time. So while I was at home, I would be more so like a loner. And so any chance I would get to hang out or leave, I would take that opportunity. I would hang out with an older cousin in the country in like Parks, Louisiana, not too far from Lafayette, maybe like 20 minutes away. And I would go there from time to time to hang out when I wasn't in school. Her parents would let her do whatever she wanted. So of course I would do whatever I wanted. I would stay out late and hang out with her friends and we would party and just ride throughout town, go to different areas. And my parents didn't know because it was always working. By the time my parents found out that I was staying out late and past curfew, it was already too late. I found out I was pregnant at the age of 14. My cousin was the person who actually told me. My parents didn't know. I was in complete denial. I kept telling myself it wasn't true. It wasn't real. It didn't happen to me. I was still in middle school. I was a cheerleader. I was 14 years old, and I just never thought that it would happen to me. But in reality, I could see and feel the changes in my body. I still dismiss the thought, and I continue on in activities. I finished out middle school telling myself that same story, that same lie, all the way to my freshman year in high school. Went through the summer, started as a freshman in high school, and no one knew that I was pregnant except for my cousin and myself. Until one day, getting off of school, I got off at my grandmother's house, and I remember it being a warm, hot day. It was warm outside. And I would get down at her house, at my grandmother's house, because I had aunts that lived there. And one of my aunts, she was around the same age as myself. And so we would go to school together. Well, as soon as I got off the bus and walked through the door, I just started just throwing up profusely at my grandmother's house. So, of course, my grandmother, she called my mom and let her know that I was sick. And so my mom, she came over to my grandmother's house and asking me if I was okay. And she was going to bring me to the doctor. So then my mom, she called my dad, and my dad, asking me all kind of questions. Are you okay? What's going on? Your grandmother and your mom saying you're throwing up, and are you pregnant? And I'm like, no, I'm still lying, still in denial, still not telling the truth at all. I just didn't know what to do. So they finally took me to the doctor, and it was then I had to own up and acknowledge the fact that I actually was. And when the doctor spoke those words, I was just so upset and angry with myself. I kept asking myself, why me, several times in my heart. I didn't want to bring a child in the world like that. But I thank God every day for my mom, because she gave me the strength to push forward. Even though everyone was upset, and I know I just disappointed my parents, the courage that my mom gave me, it just continued to push me. Well, my son, my only child, his name is DeAndre. He was born November 28, 2001. I became a teen mom on that day, but I still didn't understand the significance of that role. He was born prematurely, because I was still, like I said, I was in denial. I was still being active, trying to avoid everything and not acknowledging. But he was born on November 28, and we spent 3.5 months with him. And he was such a joy to both me and my mom and just, my family. And tomorrow, March 24th, it actually will be 19 years since his passing. He died of RSV, respiratory failure, 19 years ago. He was my only child, my only son. I miss him. I'm excited to be sharing him with you all. And at the age of 15, we laid him to rest when I was 15 years old. And it was such a traumatic experience to go through that as a teenager. And my parents, their first grandchild, my life changed forever. Our life changed forever. I felt like a failure at that time. I didn't know how to process such a traumatic loss. I didn't have any counseling. We didn't talk about anything. I didn't even process any of my feelings. I didn't even know I had feelings, honestly. But I finished school. I worked my way through college. I obtained my bachelor's in business at UL, right here in Lafayette. And I focused on entrepreneurship. Now, college was hard as well for me. I wanted to quit so many times. My last semester in college, there was like this one class that I needed to pass, but I was afraid that I was failing. So I remember calling my dad, and I'm glad I did, because he always tells me what I don't want to hear in the moment, but I need to hear it. So he encouraged me, and I just kept pushing, kept trying, and I actually passed my class, and I was excited because I didn't give up. I finally accomplished something, I finally achieved something. And at college graduation, walking across the stage felt like a breath of fresh air, a sense of relief. I felt like I finally accomplished some type of goal that I set for myself. My mom supported me all the way, and we had a family friend there as well. I'll never forget that moment. My dad, he was traveling, he was on the road, cross country, so he couldn't make graduation. And my mom's mom, which was my grandmother, she was my best friend. She had just passed away before I graduated, maybe like 2 weeks before I graduated college. And so this family friend, her son, he came as I was walking off the stage, and he brought me like some roses, and he handed it to me. And it was just such the kindest, most most kind gesture like anyone could have do, because it was a hard day. But I was excited, and I carried both my son, my grandmother, my dad, everyone, my mom, my whole family. I just carried them all in my heart as I walked across that stage. After graduation, I changed jobs a lot. I was trying to find my way. I couldn't understand why I wasn't staying on a job, and my dad would tell me all the time how important it was to build stability. So I decided to do something different. I started working on my mindset. I started studying scriptures and reading more and journaling, or I should say writing. I've been writing my thoughts and feelings for maybe over 5 or 6 years, just in notebooks. Didn't know what to think of it years later, like over 10 years later, because as I go back and reflect on it, it's like I was documenting my journey that whole time. But I didn't realize the significance in that. So be sure to journal. I relocated to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is 45 minutes from Lafayette, and I worked with some amazing leaders at the store there. Miss Emily Sparks, she was my district manager. Oh my gosh, she was amazing. She took a chance on me because my job history was inconsistent. You know, I've been through a lot of things and a lot of jobs. Whenever you applying at jobs or interviewing, a lot of times if you have inconsistency, it's very rare that you're going to get that job, especially out here in a small town like this, because they're looking for stability. So with someone take a chance on me, I just ran with it. And she would tell me all the time, celebrate the small wins, April, celebrate the small wins. It's still a win. Stop being so hard on yourself. And that stuck with me. And Miss Candace Walker, she was my store manager at the time. She was amazing. She never gave up on me. She had those tough conversations with me, and I respect her so much. She would sit down and just give me the hard, truth. And that meant a lot to me, because I like for someone to tell me the issues, tell me the issue or give me an observation. Let me know what I'm not seeing, so that way I can change it. So that way I can make a decision to change it. I can't change what I don't know. And so honest feedback is very important. So with their leadership and guidance, I was able to be promoted to a store manager with the company. I had my own store. I got promoted and I relocated to Shreveport to actually continue to grow. I started reading even more. And so I started reading this book, Law of Attraction. And I heard about the book a couple of times, but I never purchased it. I didn't read it until I actually moved and relocated to Shreveport, Louisiana. So I read the book. I read the first chapter, Law of Attraction, and I put it down. And I put it down because I'm the type of learner, I have to try things out, test it, see if it works, or if it doesn't work before I go on to the next. And so I put the book down for honestly, maybe months, months. And timing had to be right, because my son's sweet 16th birthday was coming up right around the corner. And I had made plans to go and celebrate his sweet 16th birthday. And whenever I have a personal situation or something going on where I want to get another woman's perspective, but sort of like that girl talk, like that, the home girl, I would always call my aunt. This is the one that I went to school with, and my grandmother, my aunt, her at my grandmother's house. And so I would call her and I would tell her like all types of anything I'm going through. I could talk to her about anything. She always would tell me the truth. She always gonna be real. Like she won't sugarcoat it. And I just really, really value that. So one day I was talking to her about a situation, well, actually a relationship that I was hesitant about actually getting into. And I was explaining to her, like, you know, he has children and I don't have any, and just that whole situation, that whole scenario. And she was like, well, you come from a blended family. Like, you have a child. Like, and she's telling me all these things. And I'm like, wait, that is true. Like, that is true. What's going on? So she helped me to realize that I wasn't acknowledging certain things. And we started getting on the subject of forgiveness. And like, I learned growing up, you know, you forgive others, you know. I never heard about forgiving yourself. I didn't even know how like to go about forgiving yourself. So she brought it up to me and she was like, maybe you should write a letter to your son. And I was like, well, his birthday is coming up, so I'll do that. I'll try that. And so I actually took her advice and I wrote a letter. And the day of his birthday, on his sweet 16th birthday, I remember driving from Shreveport, Louisiana. I was so excited because I was just excited to celebrate his sweet 16th birthday. We always acknowledged him. I always acknowledge him. But I never took myself seriously as his mother. And that was my first time actually like celebrating his sweet 16th birthday or just his birthday as if he was here with me. And that connected with me with law of attraction, because law of attraction reminds me of faith, having faith, you know, because you have to believe in what you cannot see. You have to just believe and act upon it. And so that's what we did. And so I remember getting a birthday cake, balloons, and it was my mom, my aunt, my grandmother. We sung happy birthday at the gravesite. I wrote the letter. I put it in a balloon. On his sweet 16 balloon, it had a car on it, because I knew if he was here, I would have liked to get him a car. So we did that, but it was amazing. And after we left the gravesite, we actually went to the hospital where he passed at Women's and Children on Ambassador, and the letter was in there. And so I released the balloon there, but something that I wanted to just speak on was that before I released the balloon, when we was at that gravesite and I had my moment alone there, I actually read the letter. I read the letter out. And in the letter, I actually exposed like my whole experience, what I was going through, what I went through, how I was feeling, why, just breaking everything down, because now I understood why I behaved or why I didn't understand, you know, certain feelings or thoughts or actions at that time. And that day, I actually felt like my soul was set free. Like we was free. Like we could just celebrate life, all of us together as one. And so it took 15 years for that healing to come about for me, you know, because growing up, we didn't talk about those tough situations or those traumatic situations. Like in our family, we deal with it. We just move on. We don't speak on it. But that cycle is started to, you know, it turned, because that's where your healing comes in. So growing up, I felt like I was in the wilderness. Like I had to find, like, trying to make my own path with no one to really show me the way. But I always had a vision for my life, and I had strong, smart women who inspired me along the way. I always searched within, no matter what. I always followed the promptings of my heart, the urges of my heart. And it was within that I received that clarity, the peace, and the understanding. I learned that power of forgiveness, not only of others, but for yourself as well, is detrimental. Like, forgive yourself. Like, self-love is so important as well. Like, because you are important. And so everything happens for a reason. We hear it all the time. Everything happens for a reason. But I never stopped searching for that reason. I want to know the reason. So endurance, long suffering, unconditional love, hope is what I've been blessed with. And my dream is to mentor middle and high school students, share some of my lessons, and be an example for them. My dream is that my story will show others what's possible and let others know that you're never alone and that we could break chains together.
Thank you, April. You got that message across. We appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your story. Thank you so much tonight to all of our storytellers. I'm going to bring them back one by one so we can all wave thank you. Erica Fox, Ray Alford, Carly Sherman, Charlene Rubin, and April Johnson. What a blessing you've all given us by sharing not only your stories, but your hearts with us. And on behalf of the storytellers and the Daily Advertiser, thank you for making us a part of your evening. Have a great night.
Mm.